Washington football. Woo! Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Burgundy Zone. I am your host, Kyle. I will not be joined by my co-hosts for this episode. I'm going solo since I'm off for today. But the title of tonight's episode is Playoff Bound. And just wanted to say the Burgundy Zone is a part of the Frederick Podcast Network. You can find out more by going to www.listenfrederick.com. And to help me break down what I witnessed last night in person with my wife is our good friend of this show, Mr. Ryan Fowler. Thank you so much for blessing us on this fantastic Monday, Victory Monday. How you doing, Ryan?
Kyle, it couldn't be better, man. It's a awesome day for the Burgundy Gold, and excited to talk some ball with you as always.
Absolutely, man. First things first, you got to go, like Fred Smoot likes to say, let's talk about Jedi 5. All right, and his performance last night, because it's funny, when they were doing, we got to our seats fairly early, Ryan. And so I was sitting there for like an hour and a half before the game even started, just sitting there in the rain. But when Jayden was doing warm-ups, I was telling my wife, I was like, pay attention to how he throws the ball. Because when he was doing these drills with Terry where it was like mimicking a slant route, and so Jayden was just not even stepping into it, just taking one hand and tossing it. And it was like a fastball, dude. And I was telling her, like, that is not something a normal human possesses. And you saw it last night where he was zipping those balls in there. Just talk about his performance last night. I know obviously the interception is a different thing, but overall, what was your takeaway?
Man, Kyle, I'm running out of adjectives to describe Jayden Daniels. It seems like every week, from the early portions of the year to the middle portions of the year to now really the last 4 weeks, where they rattle off 4 straight wins after 3 straight losses, where you can see this offense just continually, Cliff Kingsbury saying at times, we're going to put it in Five's hands and let him make plays.
Mm,
We saw QB counter, QB draw,
yep.
everything last night in those certain situations to where it became a part for the Falcons to where how do we stop Jayden Daniels? And this is where what makes so exciting for us moving forward for not just whatever this season holds in the future, but for potentially the next decade for this young man, because we talked about him having a good, really historic rookie year. What he is doing, and he continues to evolve, where almost 230 yards through the air and 127 on the ground yesterday. It's just MVP level stuff. And I don't think that's being overzealous. This is a young man that in the next few years, we're going to be talking about the Josh Allens, the Lamar Jacksons, the Mahomes of the world. Jayden Daniels is going to be in the conversation if he isn't already in that conversation, Kyle, because he is already as valuable as any of those guys are to their team, including the Saquon Barkleys of the world, who we know are sensational. He is unbelievable. And I feel like every week he does something different to elevate his game. And the biggest thing as well, Kyle, when I look at Jayden Daniels and the elites of the elites in football, is what do you do and can you elevate the guys around you? Because Terry McLaurin yesterday, 1 catch, 5 yards, tip your cap to AJ Terrell. But he's elevating everybody around him. And that's what the elites of this league do. And he's been absolutely sensational.
I said that last night during the game, he is slippery. Even when they have an open shot on him, I think not Mike Tirico, Chris Collinsworth, I rewatched the game before we started recording here, and he made a great point when Jayden in the open field is able to spin out of a tackle. A guy is open field on him. He just catches his footing, runs for the first down. I think that was like on a or second and 15. And
Yeah.
it really goes to show what he brings at that next level. And then that first touchdown pass to Alamati Zacchaeus, where he's able to escape to his left. He doesn't have the absolute perfect mechanics, but like I talked about before, that flick of the wrist where he's able to fastball that thing into Alamati before that DB gets there, it just speaks to the kind of athlete he is, and calm, cool, and collected through and throughout. But my next question for you, Ryan, who would you say is the unsung hero of the game last night?
I'm gonna go Chris Rodriguez. I'm gonna go Chris Rodriguez. The way in which he ran the football, I mean, I could even throw Jeremy McNichols in there as well. But the way they stepped up, because I think moving into this draft class, and we'll get to that stuff down the road, I do think, Kyle, they need another back in this room that can create his own alleys and creases away from just seeing what you have inside the tackle box. And Brian Robinson as that build up speed type of runner.
Yeah.
I do like Brian, but I do think they need another guy. But it is Chris Rodriguez. He plays as a guy that was from this former regime where these guys continue to depart. he just runs like every snap is his last. And he also made that huge catch to get that first down, one catch, 12 yards in the day. He's just a flat out athlete that competes. And we always talk about that stereotype of lunch pail type of guys. But the story of Chris Rodriguez and the SEC from Kentucky to now a day three pick last year and just being a guy that started out the year as RB4 on this roster to what he did in a huge moment and really you can call it basically a must-win type of game for the Commanders last night was just outstanding. And I love to see guys that get chances to show up, similar to how we saw Tyler Owens this year on special teams show up as a former UDFA. But tip my cap to Chris Rodriguez. I love watching him play football and the competitiveness and toughness in which he approaches the game because as you know, Kyle, is may not be around in the future, but just seeing guys right now, what he can do, is fun to watch as a guy that can beat his tail off.
Yeah, and that drive that Chris Rodriguez had the touchdown on, he obviously finished with 5 carries and 16 yards and a touchdown. But just getting that extra yardage, running through tackles, AJ Terrell tries to come at his knee. He just runs right through it. That tough yardage. And then Jeremy McNichols, one of my good friends, Omar, texted me. He thought he deserved a game beer because that 4th and 5 where he just stretches
Yeah.
out a little bit more, and that's something that proved to be pivotal and something that Washington needed. So I think that those are warranted. But to kind of make this just you and I kind of pod here. I wanted to. We usually do game beers with my co-hosts. Besides the unsung hero who you already picked in C-Rod, who do you else think deserves a game beer?
I really like what I saw from Quan Martin,
Yeah,
Kyle. I think this is also, I mean, we can talk all day about the secondary.
yeah.
Michael Davis, St. Jude's, that whole situation. And I won't talk about Percy Butler on that coverage against Kyle Pitts. I won't talk about that. But Quan Martin, away from the pick, I think all year long, I think he's been an unsung hero in the back end for this defense to where another prior regime guy, play low, play high, really a high athletic profile, just does what you need to do on the back end of this defense, really holds everybody together. Where there's been so many guys rotating inside, rotating outside, Marshall Lattimore coming in midseason. Those type of adjustments and having new guys on the outside sometimes takes a while to adjust from what you want to do from a scheme perspective. And I think Quan kicking the game off with a pick yesterday, always a sure tackler. Seems like he's always in the right spot. So I'll give my game beer to Quan Martin.
And that's a great one. He led the team in tackles with 8. Obviously 2 pass deflections as well. But you talked about that pick early on, which was huge. And
Yeah.
that I'm telling you, man, last night that place was rocking. And it was so much fun. My wife actually made a comment to me early on. She's like, if you're gonna keep screaming like that, I'm gonna have to go sit somewhere else. And I was like, okay, well,
Love
you're
it.
about to find out, baby. Trust me. And like you could
Yeah.
tell by my voice right now, we had a lot of fun yelling, but she didn't end up moving at all. But somebody would I think deserves a game beer. Chris Comerton in our Discord made the comment that Nick Allegretti, once Tyler Badass went out, that Nick Allegretti was making the calls for Michael Dieter from the guard spot. So I think that deserves credit in itself because they really had to adjust on the fly there. In Atlanta, with 5 sacks on the day on Washington, we're really putting pressure on Jayden early. But in that second half, it just seemed like everything changed. I think Allegretti, all I got, he deserves a lot of credit for that. But the other person I'll give my game beer to, Jeremy Chin. He was a force yesterday, coming up and making some huge hits. The coverage on Kyle Pitts down the sideline where he's able to make the contact on his chest pad, but then doesn't make contact with his hands until that ball is in
Yeah.
Kyle Pitts' hands. I think that he was instrumental last night as well. That's somebody else that wholeheartedly deserves it. Is there anyone else you think deserves it?
Man, I mean, it's funny because you win a game like that, as crazy as it was, you think about just so many moments in that ball game. I mean, I'll even give a shout out to Zane Gonzalez for just knocking down his kicks because it's
Right.
been such an up and down year, getting out there and executing and doing your one job that you have that we always talk about with kickers. But Allegretti is a great one. It is a great one. So I wouldn't say anybody else that really stood out other than Lamade Zaccheaus. I think definitely deserves some props other than the drop, of course, over the middle of the field late in that ball game that, would have liked to stick his hands up instead of sometimes body catching it, get your hands up, be a hands catcher and work over the middle of the field. But just a few guys definitely stood out. I think we covered them all. But of course, there's going to be some guys, and then we'll watch the tape a little bit more and see which guys, again, even stood out even more.
Well, obviously Jayden Daniels deserves it, but he's in the VIP. He's got his own
Yes.
bottles with the sparklers on it. We all know that. But the one guy that we are missing is Zach Ertz with 6 receptions, 72 yards, 2 touchdowns on 7 targets. That set, well, I think it was 2nd and 20 where Jayden
Yeah.
escapes out of the rush, able to dump that thing off to Zach. Zach getting the extra yak, and everyone complaining about Zach being old and everything. He's got hands, man, and he catches it when he gets his hands on. He doesn't let it go. And a lot of credit to Zach for coming out in this game and performing at a high level. Because, dude, when that last touchdown pass came down in overtime, we were on the opposite side of the field. I saw Jayden unload it. I saw Zach go up. As soon as it touched his hands, I started screaming. I didn't
Yeah.
even know if he caught it or not, but you just kind of knew that he was going to catch that football. And a lot of credit to Zach Ertz and the rest of this offense. Dude,
And Kyle, he could have had three because he dropped the one earlier in the game,
yeah,
going
you're
over the
absolutely right.
top.
Yeah,
You
you
know?
did. You're right. You're right. And but the poor one about that is that JMO was running across the middle wide open on that play, which could have been an easy six. But look, we don't need to. It's not time for that. But to kind of bring this back down a little bit, the penalties last night. Washington committed 13 for 108 yards. Some of those holding calls, I thought, especially on KJ Osborne and Sam Cosmi, were atrocious.
Yes.
Because in particular, KJ Osborne had his hands on the inside of the DB, and the DB just fell backwards. I didn't understand that one. And Sam Cosmi's guy like falls at his feet, and they called a holding on him. Kind of, are you concerned at all about the penalties? Because we kind of think as a podcast group, when they have a bad penalty game, usually the next week they come out and they play cleaner. But it hasn't seemed like those penalties have gone away. Are you concerned at all by that?
Yeah, I am. I am. It's 3 straight weeks, and usually when a team is penalized that much, it's a team that doesn't execute and the lack of discipline. But you're going out and still winning games. But you move into the playoffs and potentially,
Yeah.
most likely, right, 99% chance you play either the Rams or the Eagles. That's not going to work. It's not going to work. 13 penalties is ridiculous. But I will say that the Cosme one stood out to me. Neither of those for me were penalties. That's a trap technique that offensive linemen are taught at 13, 14 years old to knock the hands down and have a guy fall on their face and then you
Yep.
lay on top of them.
You're
That's just
absolutely
a
right.
technique that's taught. And
Yeah.
Sam Cosby's been doing that since we drafted him out of Texas years ago. And there's linemen all across football that do that.
Mhm.
So those were not penalties. I'm not going to sit here and say that the refs don't understand football and they don't understand offensive lineman techniques up
No.
front. But those are not penalties. And I agree with you with KJ Osborne dominating a guy to the ground because similarly last week, when Lamade Zaccheaus blew back Cooper DeJean on his backside 5 yards downfield, they didn't throw a flag on that. And I think that's similarly what KJ Osborne did last night. So some of those penalties were absolutely ticky-tack, but it seemed like, Kyle, after every big play that Washington had, either offense or defense, there was a flag thrown, and it was ridiculous. And they got to cut those at least in half or hopefully stay under five when they get against these better teams in the playoff moments to where every series always matters in a ball game, but in those playoff moments where every second, every play matters, you can't be giving teams free opportunities.
Yes, and as much as Brian Robinson did pretty well, having 13 carries for 60 yards, we talked about Chris Rodriguez having 5 carries for 16 yards and a touchdown. Obviously, Jayden Daniels was the leading rusher with 127. But are you as concerned as I am about the running game and the offensive line performance in that regard? Since, in the playoffs, you can't really garner and say that Jayden is going to be your leading rusher every single game in that sort of sense, or going forward, that's a bad recipe for things. How do you think the offensive line's performance was last night in that regard in running the football? Because I totally believe that they're not doing enough in being able to move bodies around.
Yeah, I agree. And they brought in these guys, Allegretti. I mean, we miss Biotish. They haven't been able to run the ball when Biotish isn't in the game.
Yeah.
And then, of course, on the right side with Sam Cosmi. These guys are in the building because they're vertical movers in the ground game. But yesterday, against the likes of David Onyemata and Grady Jarrett, now Grady's been one of the best interior linemen in football for the last decade, but there was no movement up front. And Brandon Coleman, I know for me personally, I've said a lot of good things about Brandon Coleman. Last month of the year, the young man has taken some speed bumps so far. You can kind of see some struggles on the outside. There's reasons why, even heading into the year, Kyle, we had conversations about is he a tackle, is he a guard? That's conversations that scouts had heading into this year. But I'm not giving up on him. I think he's still a franchise left tackle. He's done a nice job. But overall, they were not moving bodies up front. And really in its entirety, even in pass pro, when they're asked to drop anchor, they were not good enough. Because the first 13 weeks of the year, this Atlanta Falcons front seven has been historically bad inning after the passer. Now, they've done some different things. They made some adjustments. They moved some guys around. D'Angelo Malone, they drafted to be an outside backer. Now he's playing off ball backer. They've done some different things to try to move some guys around. Even their guy, Caden Ellis, that is basically their Frankie Louvu of their defense.
Right.
They did some different stuff last night, but the offensive line was not good enough. And for Washington and really the best running football teams in the league as far as them, Philadelphia, Baltimore, those types of teams, Detroit, you got to get the ground game going. You have to, especially in the playoffs. And that's a huge thing because I get it, put it in Jayden's hands, that's fun. But last night to where it was consistently 5, 5, 5, making play after play after play, you got to at times be able to turn around 10 to 20 times a game with confidence and have a guy that can take a little pressure off of your quarterback. Because also last night, I know that hit that Jayden took when he fell back on his leg, everybody was scared in their right mind as far as what happened there because we immediately got Vietnam flashbacks to 2012.
Well, for me in particular, I'll be honest with you guys, just me personally. I had a huge fear going into this game. My first date that I went on with my wife was in 2012. We went to that Ravens game.
Oh no.
And so I was very I love my wife. This was an anniversary gift that she got me, but it was a concern that I had, just the bad juju sort of thing. And so when that hit happened, I'm sitting here saying, no way, no freaking way. But apparently he is the flexible guy. And it's insane that he didn't get more nicked up than he was. He stayed in the game. And not only that, he rushed for 127 yards after that.
Right.
Just going to show how an athletic freak Jayden is. Whereas when you see that still picture where his ankle is sitting almost sideways, 90 degrees from his femur, and you're like, how is he walking right now? It,
Yeah.
I know everyone was as scared as I was when that happened, but it just goes to show that Jayden Daniels is an alien. He's a freak of nature. Now, my next question for you, how does it feel? Because being 11-5 is insane, personally. If you asked any of us in the preseason if we thought that we'd be winning double digits, let alone the playoffs, we'd probably say you're smoking something, right? So as of right
Right.
now, how does it feel, man?
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And I think the biggest thing, Kyle, that I continue to try to tell myself is this is year one.
Yeah.
This is year one of laying this foundation. Yesterday, the roster holes continue to pop up. They need some more pass rushers. There was nobody able to win isolated. Everything was games and stunts up front, exotic stuff like that, simulated pressures.
Yeah.
No one can win isolated up front. The corners room, perimeter guys. Sanders Still and Igbenogany are their best corners on the field with Lattimore's not on the field. I'm getting a little frustrated with Marshawn Lattimore. I got to get him on the football field. I want to see him playing. I know it's a long-term investment as it is a short-term investment, but they need him healthy on the football field. But it's a great feeling. 11 wins, and really, you look at the Steelers game, you look at the Dallas game. Those are 2 wins potentially there. Zach Ertz first down, maybe you win that game. Maybe you're sitting here with 13 wins. You never know, and they're in a position to win every single week, specifically because of what Jayden Daniels is to do under center and how this team is going to build in the future with the draft capital they have, the free agency money they have. If they want to open up a wallet, do they want to pay a Chris Godwin? Do they want to pay a Trey Hendrickson? Do they want to try to make a move for a T. Higgins? We don't know. Those things will happen down the line. I'm not sure if they'll do that. But this team is in year one. And I think that's the biggest thing. What makes me personally so excited about how you're laying this foundation and you're 11-5, and who knows how far you'll go in the playoffs because of who you have under center.
Yeah, look, Ryan, I'll tell you right now, I'll donate my hamstring, if it's possible, to Marshawn Lattimore. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
it would help at all, but I'm 100% down for it. Now, to wrap this up, only a couple more questions for you, Ryan, but Jonathan Allen made his return last night, and thank goodness that he did. I'm very happy for him to be able to experience this. I know he gave the team a pregame hype up, but how did you think John Allen did in his return?
I thought he was just fine. I thought he was fine. You could definitely see the rust still, but those are some of the questions we even asked pre-injury. His ability to hold the run, especially against double teams, keep those linebackers free. I didn't see it a lot last night. I didn't hear anything from Deron Payne as well, in the run game or getting after the passer in the interior. Now, again, that's a tip of your cap to Bergeron, Dahlman, and Lidstrom in the middle. They're a damn good three that doesn't get enough attention. But I thought John Allen was just fine last night. I think he's somebody that really next week against Dallas and moving into the playoffs, I think he's somebody that really playing for his life potentially in the Burgundy and Gold because he is a prior regime guy. He's getting up there in age a little bit. I appreciate his rehab efforts and getting back onto the football field. And you're always going to not, it's great to get a talent like that back on this defense. But there's been some lapses in his game here, really the last year or so. I'm not sure if he's fallen off. I don't know what's going on there, but he's not the same player as he was even 2, 3 years ago. So I thought he was just fine. I'll probably give him a C minus grade last night.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are going to get my next question for you. I know a lot of people are going to get on the defense, just the way that the game ended, how it started, what kind of happened to them on the ground and everything. But this
Yeah.
defense, somehow finds a way to get off the field when they need to. They held Atlanta to 2 of 10 on third downs, which was absolutely huge for this team. And they did a good job of, obviously, they weren't getting home a lot. They only had 2 sacks on the day. But when they had pressure in Michael Penix's face, when they brought that interior pressure, he was wildly inaccurate. We saw that many times last night. What are they doing differently in these sort of circumstances when they just find a way to win? It seems like they find a way to give the ball back to the offense. Is there any differences that you're seeing in that?
I'm not seeing any differences. In certain times where it's a team that consistently lives in cover one, right? For those unfamiliar, it's one single high safety and man on the outside. Usually, with the guys you have, with Washington has, you don't run a lot of man with the guys that you got, but they're just doing a good job, specifically the second half. I have no reason why OC Zach Robinson for the Falcons stopped giving it to Bijan Robinson. It seemed like it was 8 yards, 9 yards, 10 yards, and then Tyler Algier, their RB2, only had 3 carries. Why? I don't know. I have no idea. But this defense, like you said, they find ways, bend but don't break. And a lot of analytical models have this team top 10 in a lot of different categories. You watch some games, and there's going to be some offenses that say, we're looking forward to playing them because they do have holes. But at the end of the day, they have been pretty darn good all year long. And they know as a unit, if we can keep a team under 21, 24, as it was yesterday, we're going to have a chance to win because our offense puts damn near 30 points up a game.
No, you're absolutely right, Ryan. My last question for you. Going against Dallas, would you be willing to bench anybody because you are playoff bound? Because this is a question people have brought up, and one thing that I would say is let's cross that bridge when we get there. I was more worried about beating Atlanta and actually solidifying a playoff spot, right? But there's also implications to this because I think Washington right now, they are in the possession of the 6th seed, which is something that you really covet and want. But how would you go into next week?
I would take it by half. I think I tell my starters we're playing the first half, see how it goes. It's going to be interesting. It's amazing to actually have this feeling too, Kyle. We're not the Chiefs where they're benching everybody next week and Carson Wentz is starting for them, or our old friend Carson. But I would take it by half. I still think if I'm a coach and looking at how in some situations this offense specifically has approached some 2-minute environments to where they consistently want to go out and get points. I'm under the mindset of attack, attack, attack. And you're a roster that absolutely has nothing to lose. You look across the NFC and you look at the Eagles, you look at the Lions, you look at some of these teams, the Packers, to where they consider themselves in their Super Bowl window. The Commanders have absolutely nothing to lose. And if I'm an NFC team, I don't want to play them because,
Right.
again, they are in year one of this thing. And this is only the start. And they're not in their Super Bowl window. But obviously, they've accelerated this timeline to where they can go out and just play freely. And if they do go in the wild card round, they potentially do lose, knock on wood, to the Rams or the Eagles. It's still a damn near a successful year. And we're immediately talking about the draft and what's to come in 2025. So I think everything is looking up for this roster, and I would just take it half by half with Dallas. And they still have something to play for. The Vikings took care of business, beating Green Bay yesterday. That was big. And now, if they want to solidify that 6th seed, they do have to win against Dallas. But again, take it half by half and see what you got. And if you're in a spot to bench Jayden Daniels and take some other guys out, Bobby Wagner, some of your veterans, Terry McLaurin as well, give some guys some rest and work into next week.
You're absolutely right. I would make the point of saying probably Tyler Badass can take the week off, especially we don't know how severe it is, but it's not one of those things you want to stress. If you guys are nicked up with something, let's
Yes.
let's calm down a little bit on that. But I think you're right. Absolutely. Let's have our starters go. We're not in the position to be sitting guys, especially heading into the playoffs. We know what kind of can happen with the bye week. And I would
Right.
also argue a guy like Jamison Crowder, who just got activated, obviously has a good relationship with Jayden, but that's not something you want to lose by bringing in with like a Marcus Mariota to start that game, right? You want to continue that relationship. You don't want to just push that away.
Right.
Ryan, before you get out of here, just like to plug your social media handle and your show, brother.
Of course. Yeah, you can follow me on X if you don't already at _Ryan Fowler. My podcast, Commanding the Huddle, 2 episodes a week on all podcast platforms.
My man. Ryan, have a great, beautiful Victory Monday, sir. Enjoy it.
Absolutely. Thanks as always, Kyle. We'll talk soon, man.
You too, brother.
All
All
right.
right, everybody. We just spoke with the man, Mr. Ryan Fowler. Always appreciate his time. Last night was wild, my friends. Absolutely wild. And speaking of wild, the Commanders just tweeted Jayden Daniels is the first quarterback in NFL history with 2+ touchdowns, 200+ passing yards, and 65 rushing yards in 3 straight games. The kid is everything that you can honestly ask for. He really is the X factor, you could say. This is not the quarterback you're looking for. That's what Jayden Daniels is doing out there on that field whenever somebody's coming up and approaching him. Last night was a dream. It was awesome to be able to go there and experience it with my wife. Seeing the light show for the player introductions was awesome. The rain, it's funny because when we first got there, we started walking towards the tailgate, the command corner tailgate, and we had left our ponchos in the car. And my wife's like, we got to go get the ponchos. I'm like, I'm not, nah. She was like, come on. So we went back, got the ponchos. We go in the stadium and get there like an hour and a half early, and it's starting to rain. I'm not wearing my poncho. I don't believe in it. I'm not a poncho, Pussy. But the lady in front of us said that she forgot her poncho in the car. So I was like, would you like to have mine? She said, of course. And she wore it for, she tried to give it back to me at the end. I'm like, no, ma'am, just keep it. But the rain was legit something that was coming down early in that game. And Jayden Daniels and the boys, they were up there warming up in the rain, having no issue at all, sleeveless, just doing their thing, normal about. And that was a factor early on in that game. But in that second half, the rain was gone. And that was huge, I think, for everybody because thought going into this game that the rain was going to be a huge factor throughout, that the running backs and the Jayden Daniels' escapability, like being able to run the football, was going to be something that was going to be limited because of the weather. But you saw in that second half where Jayden Daniels just takes him by the horns and is able to really extend drives and do things with his legs to open up opportunities for this football team. And my goodness, did he do it. The kid is the real deal. And I think Ryan is right in the sense of saying that I think you can put him up in that MVP category. And I'm not just saying that because he's the quarterback of the Commanders, but just the totalitarian aspect of it all, of what an MVP is. I think you can qualify Jayden Daniels in that realm. What he's done for this football team, he is everything. And he is the heartbeat. He is, I said, look, I'll continue to say this. Going back in that 2 minutes of the fourth quarter against the Giants in week 2. I was at that game with Hall, with the UK boys, and seeing him being able to orchestrate down the field to get that field goal to win it. I said it in that post-game podcast then. Not many teams in this league can say they always have a chance to win with their quarterback. And that's what I learned in that game, and we've seen all throughout this year that has been their MO. Made a comment to my wife. This is what, because, like, honestly, dude, she doesn't, like, watch every game. She's not all the way in it, But, like, this is what they've done all year. It's like they just find a way, and it brings me back to that Nats World Series team where even though they'd be down by 4 to 5 runs in the 7th to 8th inning, they still found a way to win games and to move on into the playoffs. And that's the kind of feeling you're getting with this team. And a lot of credit to everybody involved. Alamati Zaccheaus really proving to be the one guy you can lean on. The one unfortunate part for Terry is one receiving touchdown away from breaking the franchise record in receiving touchdowns. He only had one catch, I think, for 7 yards. He had 7 targets, though, and only completed one. Hat tip to A.J. Terrell. Some of those Terry could have caught. They hit him in the hands, but Alamati answered the call. Zach Ertz answered the call. These guys are just finding a way to move the ball down the field, and a lot of that has to do with Jayden Daniels, but they're not falling short. They're doing what they need to do. They make the plays that are necessary to win, and I think that goes a lot into what the defense is doing. Jonathan Allen coming in for I think it was the Dorrance Armstrong sack, where he's wrapping around the left tackle, forces Penix to come up, which allows Dorrance Armstrong to make that tackle. The guys are just doing little things in order to help this football team win. We can talk about the secondary because they were going after Michael Davis hard. I mean, any chance that they could. I mean, anytime Drake London was lined up on him, they were going after him in a big way. But the one thing I have to give the defense credit for was they had no big plays, really, where they were capping over top. Like, the defense did a very good job of keeping everything in front of them. One of my big points I would say is that they need to shore up their tackling because the tackling was a problem last night. A lot of arm tackles, and they were slipping through things, and they got to do a little bit better in that realm, I will say. Now, let's get into some fan questions that were submitted for this. boys, because this was a electric performance. But this one by Big Tony Shivers. In the second half, Payne and Holmes were moved to D end, and it helped stifle the run game. Do you do you do you think we'll see more of that personnel going forward against the run? I'm not sure if we'll see it going forward against the run. One of the things I said on Twitter, Tony, before this game was Bijan is a guy that can shake you in a phone booth. A very elusive runner, very fast, a hard physical runner, obviously, along with Algier. But they're going to attack the edges. And that is what we saw last week with the Eagles, where they really attacked those edges, were able to get those extra yards there. And I knew coming into this game, Atlanta was going to stress that. And so early on in this game, you saw Atlanta hitting those edges, going to the sideline. And our guys, especially on the defensive line, they were losing that outside contain. On the Bijan Robinson run to the outside for the touchdown, where he goes right past Dorrance Armstrong and he goes past Bobby Wagner. Bobby Wagner's just a step short. But Dorrance loses that outside contain, right? You see him on the offensive lineman and he is moving to the inside, losing that outside contain. In the second half, they were much more aware of that. You saw by moving Deron Payne, there's one play in particular where they run that stretch play to the left with Bijan, and Deron Payne rides that tackle all the way down the line of scrimmage, all the way to the sideline where Johnny Newton and company are able to come in and join and stop it. I saw a graphic on the game that Atlanta only had like 3 rushing yards in the second half, and that speaks to the adjustment of being able to pick up what they saw and move and adjust to it. And I think Joe Witt and company deserve a lot of credit for moving those guys around. Dante Fowler on that stunt coming in, getting held, and still coming in and swiping that ball down. And that just speaks to the guys just making an extra effort and an extra way to win the game. So do I think it's going to be something that they're going to do in every single game from here on out? I'm not sure, because we don't know about these running attacks that we could possibly face and what they're going to try to do. Obviously, we have shown the propensity to give up those kind of edge runs, but we've also have shown that the trap game and the inside has been a thorn in our backside. We saw Bijan be able to eat in that regard last night as well. So it's not like that's our one weakness in the running game and teams are going to try to exploit it. And so now we have to move Deron Payne to the outside and get bulky and move the line of scrimmage there. There's multiple things to work on here. So I don't know how they're going to attack us, but what you can say, Tony, is that that's something that you have in your back pocket, that you could sit here and say, okay, we can go to that. If they are going to that stretch, we can lean on that because it's been effective before. And it just shows that the difference in what they've been able to do. In the second half against Philly with Saquon, they did the same thing. They made the adjustments at halftime. They were able to null Saquon enough. You can talk about Kenny Pickett all you want, but that is a very good offensive line in Philly. Same with Atlanta. They did a very good job. Now the next question from Tim Towner. With regards to resting players in Week 18 to prepare for the playoffs, if Saquon Barkley wanted to play, would you let him? I played him in fantasy this week in a fantasy championship. I won. Thanks to Jayden Daniels, by the way. Thank you, Jayden. That's why I'm wearing this, dude. That's my boy right there. that's my boy. I wouldn't, especially given with what Saquon has shown to be for Philly. I think he sits Saquon. You know Saquon is not going to the running back position is a little bit different than the other ones where it's like the cohesion, the relationship between the play. Like quarterback, wide receiver, that's very important. Running back, not so much. You much more so want the rest there, right? So with Saquon, I know he wants to break Eric Dickerson's record, but in the end game, what is more important, the team aspect or the individual aspect? And glad that he got 2,000 yards. Good for him. But if I'm Philly, I would not play him. But as a Commanders fan, I would play him. All right, let's putting that out there. Now, our next question was submitted in the Discord. This one was sent in by, come on, by Yam Sensei. I don't want to look ahead to the playoffs yet. How do we get this win next week against a reeling Cowboys team on their home turf, desperate to play some kind of spoiler? I feel we need to win to keep our momentum heading into the playoffs, much less locking up the 6th seed. So, against the Cowboys, you go in with the same mindset you have in every game. And as you play your guys, and if things get out of hand, that's fine. But if there's guys that are badly injured, like I talked about with Ryan, with Badass, you don't want to force Badass into that situation. Badass could take a rest week. He's done enough. we also caveat off of this, we kind of need to have our depth guys be up to speed and be ready to answer the call if need be. A lot of coaches, a lot of teams will do this where during practice they'll sub somebody out. Like in high school, our coach used to do this all the time. He would say, "Oh, he broke his uterus. You're out. Let's get this guy in," just to be able to make sure that even your depth backup guys are in the game to be able to just make sure they're not a deer in headlights when they are presented with that opportunity. So that being said, I think that if there's guys dealing with stuff like Marshawn Lattimore, like Tyler Badass, that's a good situation for them to kind of take the week off. But you still go into it saying, we're going in to win the game. That's the MO. You don't want to go in limping. You don't want to go in overlooking, right, to the playoffs. You still want to win this football game. But if you get up by a wide margin, unlike the Eagles and Saquon in this game yesterday that they played, if you get up big, you're probably going to sit your boys, right? And that's what you're most likely looking at, Yam. Now, the next question we have submitted is from Andy Lockhart in the UK. Oi! In the 1 Point Safety Show. Who do you want in the playoffs, Kyle? I've said this before, Andy. I want the Seahawks just for a revenge factor, especially that 2012 year where, Richard Sherman was really, after the whistle, was going after Pierre Garçon. Trent Williams comes over, punches him in the head. And then just in history sense, like anytime that we were in the playoffs, it seemed like we were playing the Seahawks, even with Hasselbeck and Sean Alexander, and they were able to take care of us. Like, I want that revenge. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm scared of Philly. I'm scared of Minnesota. And look, you should be, of course, in the sense of nobody's going to be easy. But I feel like with this football team, they just find a way. And I'll say that I want Seahawks just for a personal, stubborn, kind of selfish aspect. I want to be able to get a win over Seattle to kind of just put the stamp on that this is a new book by a new author. We can kind of forget about the recent history in the playoffs with this football team, as few and far between as they have been. But I want to kind of put that new stamp on it to say it's a brand new team. Credit to Josh Harris, whose 60th birthday was yesterday. He got a game ball from Adam Peters, which Adam Peters is a G, dude. I saw him on the sideline. He was yelling at the ref after the one pass interference penalty that was thrown. I love Adam Peters for that. I can definitely, I was yelling, my dude. I was screaming. Now, the next question that we have, this one is from Arch Deluxe. What is your biggest takeaway from the game last night? That this team, it's so, like I said it before, Arch, but like their strength really is the team altogether. Like it's hard to really put into words, but like guys like Alamati Zacchaeus coming up and making plays that are necessary, extending the plays. Chris Rodriguez having those tough running yards when you really needed them. McNichols stretching for that 4th and 5. The team going for it on fourth, like their fourth downs, they were 3 for 3 on fourth down. Atlanta was 2 for 2. But like that belief that they always have a chance, like it's so crazy. It doesn't really put into words, but it's exciting. Like they are just electric, and it's a roller coaster, and you're so like you're just happy to be involved with it as much as they like to make you sweat at the end of these games. And a lot of credit to Atlanta for being able to go down the field and get that touchdown. A lot of teams would have just like fallen apart when Bijan Robinson loses that snap, right? But they're able to come back and get that touchdown, and credit to them. You'd like to see Washington be able to come down with that field goal at the end of the game with 50 seconds left and be able to get it, but, we gave the chance to Atlanta, and obviously that fell short. But biggest takeaway from last night is that this team is island of misfit toys, and it works. It's almost like your grandpa's truck that he loves to have with rag parts, the Frankenstein parts he's taken from other things. You're going to say, Grandpa, like, come on, man, just get a new car. And he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This thing's treating me well. It works. It works. It doesn't die out on me. It continues to fight. It gets me where I'm going. And I like it. And that's kind of how I feel. That's my biggest takeaway with this team. Is like all these other teams have the accolades. They have the players that everyone loves and everything. Like this team, headed by Jayden Daniels and company, just make it work. that they just make it work. That's my biggest takeaway. They just find a way. Now the next question from March. The pass rush didn't seem effective after initial viewing. Were they being less aggressive? Was Penix getting the ball out quick? What did you see? First and foremost, it's hard to be able to tell you off of eyesight just being there because the NFL game is so fast, man. There's so many bodies flying around. Things happen in such a quick millisecond. That's why film review is so important. That's why I wanted to rewatch the game today, and I was able to. But what I could tell you is they did a good job when getting that interior pressure into Penix, moving his feet. You could see that on the run that Penix has where he only gets 3 yards, but they're able to get into him, so he had to move his feet, get him off base so he couldn't plant his feet and throw that ball. And so he has to think of something, so he runs for 3 yards. But you could see that how effective it was when they were able to get to him. Even Dante Fowler with that hit. And then oh my goodness, who had the other sack? Dorrance Armstrong sack, of course. Dorrance's one was huge as well because it shows you getting that interior pressure, getting him on the ground. He fumbled both times. You'd like to be able to have Washington recover one of those at least, but it just goes to show that interior pressure was there. It just wasn't getting home. But I think it has a lot to do with the depth that they have because they're able to rotate these guys in. Offensive linemen, they're not able to rotate, right, like defensive linemen are. But adding Jonathan Allen, this is why adding Jonathan is such a huge thing for this football team because you have more healthy bodies to move in and out, fresh bodies. And I think that's probably the biggest difference there was between the first half and the second half in being able to get after Penix is just given the fact of you have fresh bodies that are coming in there and their offensive line, we were getting after it. They weren't having an easy day, so to speak, but we were able to have enough bodies to get in there. And it's reminiscent of the Eagles Super Bowl team. They had a huge depth at defensive line that they were able to rotate and keep fresh a lot, and it created a lot of pressure, especially late in games. And that's what you saw last night, Deluxe. Next question from Tim Towner. I was going nuts at the end of the fourth quarter and through overtime. I pace, will leave the room, talk, yell at the announcers. How did you guys handle it? Kyle, how did you and your wife handle it and the crowd around you? Where were your seats? We were in section 107, which is right next to the home field tunnel. I more so like on the home field side tunnel. 23 rows back. I was able to salute Sam Fortier. I had to message him and let him know, hey, I'm down here. And he looked down. We got to salute each other, which was awesome. I saw David Harrison's head. I tried to wave at him. He didn't see me. I saw Lake Lewis, Felix Trammell. So I was right below the press box. They were great seats. Absolutely amazing seats. My wife it really is an angel. There was basically there was a young boy, probably about 9, 10 years old with his mom there, and his mom was well intoxicated, and my wife made sure to go and follow them, and because the young boy escorted her out, he was very worried, and he asked her to go and check in on her, and my wife did, and we went and bought them some chicken tenders and a water bottle and stuff and made sure they ate. And my wife is just a saint in that regard, watching after them and making sure the boy was okay because, it didn't sit right with her. But it was an awesome experience. I just will say that my wife is an angel. But how did I handle it? I handled it terribly. I was screaming. I was yelling. Look, I told you before, my wife said, if you keep screaming like this, I'm going to have to go sit somewhere else. That didn't last very long for her. Yeah, I told her, I was like, you have no idea what you're in for right now. Because especially when I yell, it's loud, dude. And you could tell from my voice today, it's kind of beaten up a little bit. It's not all the way gone. I had some more gas in the tank. I was screaming at the officials with some of those calls. The Michael Davis one in the end zone I thought was very bad. I thought that ball was uncatchable. And Michael Davis turned around for the ball. And so that one I thought was very sketchy in itself. And the holding calls, I had a very bad issue with. But for the most part, it was just a bunch of high-fiving with fellow people, high-fiving my wife. My wife was in her poncho, of course. She wanted to go buy me a poncho, and I told her no, absolutely not. I will not be in a poncho. I will sit in this rain, and I will enjoy it. And I stood for most of the game, but I probably did not handle it well. I was saying a lot of things I probably shouldn't have, like, why is Michael Davis on Drake London? Why is Quan over there on Drake London? But the fact of the matter is we didn't really have any other recipe to go with. And that's what Atlanta gets paid too. They get paid to put those guys in those matchups, in those scenarios to win. And that's what they did. I think overall, I could have handled it better because there were people sitting in front of us and stuff. I probably shouldn't have been cussing as much as I was. But, that's Washington. That's what Washington does to you, man. But we find a way to win, and that's all that matters. Next question from Deluxe. Do you think the team plans a contingency for travel as the 6th seed? A trip to Dallas on the way to LA? Or is that too premature? I think it is premature, just given up. We don't know how everything's going to transpire, but I would imagine that Dan and company will probably have something in their back pocket. Like, how they did with Arizona, where they went and traveled to Arizona early in the week, stayed in Arizona in order to kind of just get that jet lag out of the way and practice like a normal week. I would imagine that Dan Quinn is going to try to replicate that sort of thing for the playoffs. But like I said about the sitting people, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But obviously, that's something where you'll have somebody else worry about, say, hey, look at some possibilities here. What could go down? Who are we going to face? And what kind of avenues we could go down to fit that in for us? But that's not something that Dan Quinn should be obviously overly concerned about. But I would imagine it's something that he is going to try to make. Next question from Tim Towner. Coleman is having his struggles in his rookie year. Have you seen anything to make you believe he cannot handle playing with left tackle, or that he might be better at right tackle, or that he's going to end up as a depth piece? The one sack on Jayden by Judon, where Zach Ertz chips him, and obviously they had brought Ellis, the linebacker, in over the guard at Allegretti. And so Coleman, linemen are taught that if you have an outside rusher and an inside rusher, your most first thing is getting the inside rusher because they have the shortest straight line to your quarterback. So he did the right thing there. But the one thing that he missed on is that he was not quick enough to chip on that inside rusher to get back to the outside rusher. Once he saw that Allegretti had control over the inside rusher, he did not get quick enough to Judon, right? He did get a hand on him, but he didn't do enough there. I think the holding call on the outside is another thing with Coleman. He's very athletic. He should be able to be fine in those sort of scenarios. But with Coleman, I think that this is his first year. He has had mixed starts, right? I would go along the way to say, I'm not going to say a depth piece, but that's somebody that, as of right now, you're okay with, but you probably want to be able to be more comfortable in that setting. If you're going against the top tier rushers, that's something you are going to have to be concerned about, in my personal opinion. And that's obviously how you want to look at it from here on out. Now, the next question we have, let's go to the Colonel's question. Question 1 is the 6th seed in the NFC. Who are we expecting to play in the first round of the playoffs? Is it possible for us to go higher in seeding with the win over Dallas next week? I thought that with the Packers losing and us winning, we got the 6th seed, but maybe I'm wrong about that. I think the 6th seed is the pretty spot that you want to sit in, given that the first overall seed is going to have a bye. And so I think it'd be 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6, and then 4 versus 5. And so if that's the case, I think that we get matched up on the winner of the NFC West, which could be the Rams, might be Seattle. I'm not 100% sure, but I would imagine it's going to be one of those Colonel teams. Probably look at the NFC West, if not for Philadelphia. Next question from the Colonel. At this point, are there any other rookies in serious consideration to compete with Jayden Daniels for Offensive Rookie of the Year? No. No. It's gone. That's out of the realm. I mean, Jayden has it locked up, in my personal opinion. And that's just coming from a Commanders fan, of course. But if you're just being honest about it and what the young man has done, it's not just the legs. Like, you can go back with RG, right? And you can say RG's legs really opened up things for the passing game. With Jayden, let's go back to the Eagles game, the game winner, Jamison Crowder. That anticipation, standing in the pocket, dialing that thing in there and flying it in before that linebacker turns, that's a quarterback play. Being able to extend with his legs and everything like that is the cherry on top of what this man has been doing. He's been picking apart these defenses. Yeah, he has mistakes every now and again. But as a passer, a quarterback, and as a leader, there is no argument for any other rookie. I know Brock Bowers is doing a fantastic job, and he deserves that. But Jayden Daniels and what he's done for this team is by far more valuable than anybody else. The young man has earned Offensive Rookie of the Year. He deserves it, and I don't care what anyone else has to say. That's fine with Brock Bowers. And he's going bald just like myself. I'm my bald brother. I appreciate you and what you've done. But this guy over here in DC, Jedi 5, he has taken it by the horns and said, give it to me. And I said for a while, all that mattered was to win games and everything else will fall into place. And they've done that. And he wholeheartedly deserves the opportunity to have that other trophy. But I would imagine that JD5 is not concerned about Offensive Rookie of the Year as much as he is about a playoff win. And I truly hope that is the case. But the young man, by far, has operated as a quarterback, doing things that nobody else has really done as a rookie, in the sense of just controlling games with his arm and his legs. And Chris Collinsworth talking about how usually if you have an incoming defender on a quarterback running, quarterback's going to get down. Jayden is much more comfortable of saying, I'm not worried about that guy. Let's see what else I can do. The fact of his arm, along with his legs and the confidence that he has, the poise, the constant knowing that you always have that chance to win with him, and it's not based on his legs, it's based on his arm as well. We've seen that many, many times, especially going to that Eagles game. 5 touchdowns throwing. He's doing everything. And it's really bleeding onto the team, to the NFL. So I think unequivocally, it's Jayden Daniels to win. And I don't think if you have anybody else on top of it, I think that you're just being contentious. You're just trying to be a rebel in that regard. Last question that we have is from Tony Franchise. Thank you, Tony, on Twitter. I really don't even have a question, but last night was an amazing feeling being there in person. I was only expecting us to find out if we found our quarterback of the future and win more than 4 games. This team has exceeded my expectations. You and me both, brother. I'm about to go on AWOD's show here at 2:30 on the radio for 910 The Fan in Richmond. And he asked me in preseason what would be a successful season. Is it a win total? Is it playoffs? And I said, honestly, I don't want to put those expectations on the young man, right? Like, I don't want to put those expectations on this team. My expectation was building a team, the camaraderie, not a collection of individuals like we've seen in Washington before. Much more so building a collective team where you have a nucleus, you have that camaraderie, those relationships. And Dan Quinn has highlighted this from the get-go. That's been one of the quickest and most successful things about this team is the relationships that they have built. And you can tell by their play, especially late in these games, that they fight for one another. And Terry McLaurin expertly saying that, yeah, it's easy to do it when you're winning games, but when you're losing games, that's when that reality is really stretched. And how close-knit are you? And we have seen, since they've lost those couple games, winning 4 straight games, by the way, that they did not lose that. They still stayed tight. And that has been such a big sigh of relief, given the fact of what they have possible in the future. You don't want to lose that. The Island Misfit Toys have banded together, and they had their Lion King obviously leading them. And they have done some amazing, amazing things that nobody really expected. And I would say that they probably didn't even expect it either, being the team. But just like all of us, they're just riding the wave. You know, they're just on their surfboard, jamming out, listening to some music, and it's pretty damn cool. And that's exactly what 11 games, Tony. They've won 11 games. And with everyone complaining about the weapons that they have, about Zach Ertz being past his prime and wanting to see Ben Sinnott and other ones getting more run because Zach Ertz is not. Zach Ertz did exactly what he needed to last night. That I have a lot of respect for Zach Ertz. And obviously he was contemplating retirement, but I'm glad he didn't. I'm glad he came out for us. And I said some things about Cliff Kingsbury last night during the lull, scoring lull. But Cliff just continues to show that his relationship with Jayden, how they call plays, the coaching staff that they have built, they deserve so much credit. Anthony Lynn with the running backs, with the wide receivers overperforming. Obviously, you could say a lot of that has to do with Jayden. but just it really speaks to the relationship of the entire team. And I think the coaching staff that Dan Quinn and company have built have been huge, absolutely huge. And so let's enjoy this, boys. I know that we want to talk about playoffs. I know the title of this is Playoff Bound. I get it. I'm just saying, let's enjoy this. And I know that we are, because I enjoyed it myself last night. Leaving that parking lot, that was awesome. It took us a while, I'm not going to lie. It took us a while. People were popping curbs to be able to get out of there. But what a wild, amazing ride this season has been. And thank goodness for my wife buying those tickets for our anniversary for that game last night. I told her so many times, thank you. You know, you're amazing. Thank you so much for doing this with me. Thank you for coming with me and experiencing this with me. The light show was cool. I thought it was really cool. I thought the warm-up video before the player intro was a lot better than the player intro. I'm just going to be honest with you. The one thing I could do away with, though, is the guitar guy. Look, I understand. Like, I get it. But we can all tell that he's not actually playing the guitar that you're hearing the sound on. And he's like sitting there going like this with it. It's like, dude, that's not even the sound you're hearing coming out of the speakers. But regardless, what an awesome time last night was. With the light show, with the vibe, the stadium was rocking. The fan base came out last night. I was telling my wife today on the ride back, like when we went for New York, when the New York was on defense, you could hear the defensive chants from Giants fans. There was a good amount of them. Last night, that wasn't a thing. We dominated that stadium last night. A lot hat tip to Washington for all the fans for coming out, being loud, and showing that we need it. Like, and the crazy thing is as loud as last night was, we can be even louder. I know that for a fact. Like, I know how deafening it could be. Like, I know that our stadium, when they got the camera on, I know that thing can start bobbing. And we haven't gotten there yet. But we should be. And I hope that Washington, if somehow, some way, we get back to the stadium for another game, that we come out and do that. It's going to be hard, going to be difficult. But I really do know that this fan base has been eager for this, and they wholeheartedly deserve it. A lot of credit to everyone who put in something last night. All the people I got to see. Todd, good to see you, brother. Sam 48, everybody. Appreciate all you guys watching this. If you made it this far, you're a frickin' champion. I appreciate you. Had a hell of a time last night. That was a dream not a dream. It was a dream just being there. But I appreciate you guys for watching this. Everyone who submitted questions in. Tony Shivers, Tony Franchise, Arch, Tim Towner, Yam Sensei, the Colonel. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. I hope you have a happy new year. We'll see you again on Wednesday. All right. Enjoy the week. Enjoy the victory Monday. We're 11-5, and we're playoff bound, baby. Washington football. Woo! What's up, everyone? This is Kyle from the Burgundy Zone. We are releasing our own merch to support the show. If you want to rock the Burgundy Zone logo or you want to see Reed's face on your shirt, we got it. We're starting with t-shirts, hoodies, and zip-up. So if you're a fan of the show, make sure you snag one before they are gone. Check out the link in our bio on Instagram, or you can find the link in the description of the video. Thanks again for all your support. Until next time.